It's December 9th, 2020, and we are here at a little creek that goes into another little creek in central Texas. And we're just going to diagnose this ancient terraforming. Let's begin. And this little tiny creek is giving us all sorts of clues that this is a terraformed object. All right? So we see the verticality of the sectioning. So they built from left to right. So on the left was their section, and they make it like a cake, different layers for specific reasons. Okay, these layers are laid down for scientific reasons. The ancients used soft earthquake mitigating layers, and we can see those eroded out. The softer layers will erode out first, alternating with hard structural layers. So always soft layers eroded out, alternating with harder layers that are structural. Okay, so that's really hard concretized gypsum. Okay, and then on top a more mottled texture to the concrete, but even the mottled capping layer meant to protect the other layers has these straight line section seams in it that go right through all these, quote, sedimentary layers, right? So that's ridiculous. That's not geology. Can't be, because nature could not put a vertical line through many different time periods, and that's what geology says that is happening here. They're saying, oh, that's just a fracture, it's a crack. Really? Oh, okay. It's so ridiculous on the face of it. One of the important things to notice about this particular section break that the ancients created as they laid down their concrete to create creek banks, river banks, and valleys and mountains and hills, is that in creek banks and river banks, we have found consistently that the ancients used diagonal construction. So the flow of the creek is this way, right? So you've got your 45 right there. So here's another section break, right? And that goes through two time periods as well. There's one time period, and there's another time period. So we have one time period here, right? Geology is telling us this is sedimentary, right? Then this is another time period. Okay, except that this layer has the same line that goes through those two time periods. So let's diagnose further. We have the hard structural layer, then we have soft earthquake mitigating layers. We see the cake that they make, okay? So we have in the center of the frame, from going from left to right, a hard structural layer, then a very thin, eroded out, soft earthquake mitigating layer, then a hard structural layer, then eroded out, soft, thin, earthquake mitigating, and then a really hard structural layer, right? Really thin layers as we see it go up, and we see the structural layers, then the earthquake mitigating layers, right? Then we finally notice that at the top they'll always use this mottled capping. This is all around Texas, and they do different things in different areas of the world. So let's have a look over here. I've never been here before, so let's just have a look at what we have. Yeah, so this was built in rather the form we see it now. In other words, no matter how many thousands or millions of years ago this is essentially what the ancients built. They built a creek bank here, right? Opposite another creek bank to go into another creek that they built. So this is what we have. We have a benevolent race or races in the distant past building creek beds, river beds, valleys, hills, and mountains. How do we know that? Because of the insistent diagonal construction. So we have that here, right? So we see the diagonal pointing toward the the creek. So the flow of the river is, or the flow of the creek is this way, and we see the diagonal construction, right? We always see that, which doesn't mean that there aren't also other lines, but generally what we find is you can see that the diagonal structuring all the way through the layers. Okay, so I'm gonna put the camera vertical like this so you can see all of those together. Okay, so that's one line. Geology will say, well, ignore that, don't even talk about that. Oh, okay. And the roots got into this too. Interesting, right? So on the left, a layered concrete cake. I should call this video Concrete Cake, but I think I'm going to call it the Great Adventure. Science, the Great Adventure. Another concrete cake, right? Sectioned, and of course we have the hard structural layer, thin soft earthquake mitigating layer. Now the soft earthquake mitigating layers that I found on 3 continents do not have to be thin. They can be thick, like in the Bosnian Pyramid Complex. The softer layers are normally thicker than the harder layers are. So it's really good for earthquake mitigation to have those soft clay layers. But the ancients knew what they were doing across the continents. They built the continents, and the evidence is everywhere. If only we could get out from under the university's nonsense. Again, we see the one line that goes through all those, quote, time periods. Total nonsense. That's not geology, that's sectioning with concrete. It's so obvious once you see it. But the ancients didn't build like we would, right? We would make everything regular. Well, things aren't regular with the ancients. So we have the capping concrete, which is mottled, and then less mottled, right? And then the softer layers even less mottled for the tops, right? But that's pretty textured, but then really, really mottled here. Interesting, right? We could speculate that the modeling has a purpose, and that the purpose might be to slow water down. So when water is, to slow erosion down, slow the process of erosion down. So when water is cascading over this waterfall, which they built, by the way, yes, there has been erosion, but they built this steep incline. This is the level that the creek bed existed at, and it has existed at for its entire lifespan, right? And then the next level is down there, and this is basically where they change levels. So this really mottled creek bed, really mottled, I mean incredible, would help to slow the water down and slow erosion down. So that's one theory about why they have it like that. We can step back from it all and get a feel for the beauty of their construction. We look at nature as beautiful. When people post photos on social media, they don't post a photo of a building. They post a photo of nature. And they'll post photos of rocks and trees and forests and rivers. And it turns out that the rocks aren't rocks. They're ancient concrete. Okay? So how do we know that? By various means. All we have to do is look. All we have to do is open our eyes. Let's have a look at this. So we have two lines there. Here's one line that goes through many, quote, eras of time, right? And here's another line that goes through many eras of time. So how many eras of time do we find? Well, it's 1, 2, 3, right? Soft earthquake where the mitigating layer, where the root is, 4, right? Then a hard structural, 5, soft earthquake, 6, hard structural, 7, hard structural, 8, soft earthquake mitigating, 9. Well, we just say 8. Let's call it 8. So that's 8, right? 8 layers that one line goes through. See the line in the middle of the vertical line? Interesting. Wonder why nature did that. And then there's this line. Let's count the layers of this line. So in the center of the frame, we have a vertical line. How many layers do you see? Well, it's quite a number. Let's say that's 10, 11, 12, 13, soft earthquake mitigating, 14, structural, 15, soft earthquake mitigating, 16, 17, 18, about 18. So that's about 18, let's say. I mean, to be generous to institutional geology, we'll just call it 15. 15 layers that one straight line goes through. Oh, okay. I'm going to turn the camera to make sure we get the feeling for what's happening here. So we have in the center the entire line. Then we have this one. Okay. We have the 45-degree angles to the flow of the river, right? To the flow of the creek. Diagonal construction, but that doesn't mean that they don't also use other lines. So here's a diagonal, right? But then suddenly that's almost a right angle there. And here's an angle that would be parallel to the flow of the river. So they do use other lines of construction, okay? And they use the softer layers in 2 ways: to mitigate earthquakes and to give us soil. Now in Texas we have sulfate-rich gypsum slowly eroding out from the softer layers below the structural layers, okay? So this provides potent fertilizer for the soil, so crops can grow. Isn't it wonderful? Thanks, ancients. That was nice. And again, we see the alternating layers below the capping layer. So there's the capping layer, soft earthquake mitigating. You can see the eroded areas because they're in shadow. So that's how we know that they're soft earthquake mitigating. So they protected their capping layer with soft layers below, and the capping layer protects the soft layers below by being hard. I mean, it's fantastic, fantastic engineering. Here's some diagonal construction, right? So thanks for that, ancients. We can look down in a different perspective. You can see how mottled this concrete is, and yet, even though it seems chaotic, it has these straight lines in it. Huh. Universities would tell us that this capping layer on the creek bed is natural, obviously. Chaotic, so chaotic. Oh, but how's chaotic nature forming this smooth side there? Institutional geology. I wonder how that's happening. It's almost as if, no, it couldn't be. Somehow this chaotic material is forming smooth sides with straight lines. I mean, it does look natural, right? But once you see the diagonal construction of the layers below, the capping layer, and you begin to wonder about the smooth lines and the smooth faces, I mean, right? And the straight-lined vertical faces that keep cropping up, then you go, wait, how? How did this happen? More straight lines, right? More vertical straight lines. See, that's the important part. Geology can explain horizontal straight lines. It's sedimentary, yay! But it cannot explain the vertical lines through the sedimentary layers. So that is another clue that this is terraforming, but all the clues add up to terraforming. It's not like some clues add up to geology. They all add up to terraforming. So geology would say, we had this mottled layer and it was that certain time period where stuff was mottled and stuff. Because reasons. Oh, okay. But then the layers are at different heights. So we have the capping layer in the far distance, let's just have a look at that. Let's zoom in on it. We use the zoom feature. So way over there, we have the mottled capping layer, right? Try and get in on it. There it is. Below it, soft earthquake mitigating layers. Softer. Some of them are structural, some of them are soft and chalky. Then we have another height for the capping layer. So the capping layer is 8 feet up above, and then it's in the middle of the frame, and then we have another one that's that I'm standing on, which is another several feet below the second capping layer down. So this is also mottled concrete. So I can't decide whether we should name this Geology Becomes Ridiculous, Concrete Cake, or Science the Grand Adventure. But let's look at these straight lines, okay? We'll just turn this like this so we can see the line going through this, quote, sedimentary material. Oh, okay. Sedimentary, okay. Well, that's interesting. How this points across the creek. See that point? Same with this. So this is indicating diagonal construction. So see that point? It's pointing across the creek there. Okay. See that point? It's pointing across the creek. That indicates that these are 45-degree angles, approximate 45s, because the creek's going that way. So we have a 45-degree construction, right? Nothing could be more obvious. But the universities want us to believe that this is all just happenstance. More pointing. So it's insistently telling us. It's like a big arrow saying this is construction. We constructed it diagonally to keep it strong. I suspect the ancients would be shocked that we can't see their construction. All you do is see constructed sections with straight lines between them and smooth faces in between the sections. So in other words, we have this, right, which is not perfectly smooth, but does not have the feeling of a crack, right? This, which is not perfectly smooth, but then does not have the feeling of a crack. This, which is not perfectly smooth, but does not have the feeling of a crack. Same. So we keep finding this construction which is different from what we would do, but it's definitely a project brought about by an intelligent race, as opposed to a natural phenomenon, okay? So we see the vertical line right here, right? Vertical line. And the ancients would say, well, of course it's constructed. Can't you see that? It's so obvious once you see it. But we have a veil over our eyes because we've been told it's natural. Now this chert, see that chert in the middle? It's 50 times stronger than gypsum. So they have really super strong layers occasionally throughout. And that chert, we can find that layer right here again. It shows up. So that's a super strong layer, and geology will say, oh, that's just happened to be a homogeneous layer that happens to be much, much, much harder. Well, it's possible. But once you see all the other lines of evidence that tell us this is terraforming, then you realize that the ancients put that down there specifically to be used as a structural layer to make sure that this stayed exactly where it is, you know. And then again we come to this incredible straight line through what the universities will tell us is sedimentary geology. Well, no, impossible. Nature can't do that. So this straight line gives us the clue, right? So all those time periods have vertical lines through them. Oh, amazing. Even this little vertical line, it goes through all those layers. So those layers, that's one time period according to the universities. Then there's about, I don't know, 7 little tiny layers that tell us they're different time periods according to geology. So 1 plus 7, and this one, 8. And then this one, 9. So let's get close. Ready? Let's take note as well that in the creek bed itself, the layers do not have the soft earthquake mitigating layers in them. Gee, I wonder why. Just like in Bosnia, in the Fojnica, the soft earthquake mitigating layers stop at a certain level. Why would that be? One would ask. Let's see where they start. There they start. Now we got some soft earthquake mitigating layers. But down here, no. Why? Because if you had soft earthquake mitigating layers in your creek bed wouldn't be around for very long because the water would wash them out. This deer does not realize that the creeks and rivers where she comes to drink are artificial creations, okay? That deer has no need to know. To me, it doesn't matter if it's artificial or natural, but science wants to know the truth, and science goes with evidence. So all we can do is look at evidence. Do we have the truth at the end of the day? No. We have an evidence-based theory, and that theory falls in the face of evidence against it that's compelling, or the theory stays strong as evidence continues to be found in favor of that theory. So there's the main creek, and here's our little side creek, right? This little tributary. And we can see the obvious construction from afar, right? You can see in the center there's one section, that's one cake. There's another cake. Layered cake, right? Now I'm thinking we could call this geological fruitcake. That'd be a good title for this video. Geological fruitcake. Because that's a geological fruitcake right there. Otherwise known as ancient terraforming. Alright? There's that beautiful church. Yeah. Yep. There's another geological fruitcake right there. Interesting how these two lines converge. Let's get closer in on them. So it's all coming to a point, right? So they're converging on each other, right? That's clear. Then we move back and we can see that this line also on the right is coming to a point. So they're all converging at that point down there. So the ancients did build generally in triangle shapes because triangles are strong, all right? They also did build with right angle construction, right? And these are at a 90 degree to the flow of the river. But then we also have the insistent 45s to the flow of the river, like this angle here. Alright, so we're here at the main creek, to which the smaller creek was a tributary. And we see different lines of construction. So we see what is clearly constructed sections, because we see the vertical line that goes through all those layers, right? Get closer. So we see that one line going through all those, quote, time periods, as geology will tell us. That's a right angle to the flow of the river. Here's a 45 to the flow of the river, this angle. What other angles can we find? That's neither a right angle nor a 45. That's more like an 80 degree angle. This is more like a 45. Let's pull back a little so we can see it. Yeah. Here's a diagonal layer. One diagonal layer doesn't prove anything. And proof is a never receding horizon. What we need is evidence. So here's a 90 degree angle. We see the converging angles here, right? So it's interesting, right? 90 degree angle. But then we have the pointer, the 45 degree angle. Interesting, right? Saying this is constructed, If you missed the other things, straight lines through chaotic material. Here's a big pointer. 45 to the flow of the river, essential 45s. I mean, you could quibble and say, but this is all broken and fractured and we don't think it's really a line. Okay, well, still, you have the essential 45-degree angles to the flow of the creek. So we come along the creek bank, we see this armadillo, and then we see a line that somehow goes through all these time periods. Straight line, 90 degrees to the flow of the river. Here's a 45 to the flow of the river. You can see it better if we come up here. 45 to the flow of the river. So there's a 45 going this way, and then they switched, and there's a 45 going this way. Interesting, right? So there's that 45. All right, what else can we find? 45 to the flow of the river, right there. All right, and that line goes through all those layers. So how did that happen? I guess it just happened, you know. Things just form and things just happen because reasons. Straight lines that are vertical, right angle vertical lines through, quote, sedimentary layers. All right, let's count the layers. So on the right, it looks like 2 layers there meet 1 layer here. So let's just call it 1 layer. Give geology a break, okay? So we have that line, right? Going through that layer. Then we have, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, plus a bunch of thin layers, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's say 11 layers, all right? 1 line. Wow, amazing. So no matter where we look on this creek bank, the evidence continues to support the terraforming theory. See that straight line? That's a vertical line. Vertical line through many layers. Vertical line through many layers. Okay? Smooth face sections. I wonder how nature did that. And the line continues through many layers, right? Smooth face section. How did nature do that? Amazing. 1 line through many layers. Impossible, right? But institutional geology will say, don't even worry about it. It's just a crack. Oh, really? Okay. It's not a geological fruitcake. In other words, it's not ancient terraforming. They're saying that the ancients did not build this section as a cake, a concrete cake, and then move to this one and build this one as a concrete cake, right? They're saying the ancients did not build sections. This just happened. That's the 45 to the flow. So wherever we look, we see the beauty of the ancients' work. Endless smooth faces, right? Smooth faces and on the interior of this chaotic material. So this is chaotic on the top, right? Very mottled, and then suddenly smooth. Suddenly smooth. I wonder how that happened. So nothing could be more obvious than that this is terraforming. All right. Now I have diagnosed this particular area before, but I didn't come quite this far. And we see the 45-degree construction to the flow. Okay, so I'm at a 90 degree right now, and that's a 45. And that's a 45. And you're like, but that's just a big rock. Really? Okay. And then we have other 45-degree marks. Pretty interesting, right? We got to figure out what those pock marks are one of these days. Pretty darned interesting. Because geology will tell us those are natural, and they're at 45 to the flow of the river, just like this is. Let's go over and check out that bank over there. There are no soft earthquake mitigating layers in the creek bed itself. It's all hard baked layers, right? And then eventually we begin to see softer layers directly below the capstone. Here's a capstone layer here, right? But then another soft earthquake mitigating layer that's been eroded out, okay, below the main capstone layer. So there's the capstone layer, mottled, but still with the straight lines and the, you know, the straight vertical lines through it, showing that it's a sectioned creation. Then the soft earthquake mitigating layer, right? Another hard structural, quote, capstone layer, and then a little bit of soft earthquake mitigation going on, right? But then once we get down here, no more of that, because they didn't want the water to wash out their structural creek bed. The creek banks, it's a different thing. They want the creek banks to erode little by little, so they have the nice, soft, chalky gypsum, giving us ecological terraforming as the sulfate-rich gypsum erodes out, right? Little by little, and you have this chalky material that erodes out. But when you get down to the main creek bed, it's only hard structural layers. There's no alternating layers, so we don't see any erosion between layers. It's all hard, all the way down. This is Jock Doubleday reporting from a little creek in central Texas. I hope everyone has a scientific day, a non-hallucinatory day, a day in which we can see the ancients' continental terraforming for what it is. A large-scale concrete project in the distant past. So I'm walking home along this road, and I see the diagonal construction here too. So you can see the section faces, right? Essentially smooth compared to the mottled top, right? Smooth section face, right? Compared to the mottled top. More of this kind of construction. 45 degree angle there. Big piece. Let's get back from it so you can see what I'm looking at, okay? So we have these triangular shapes in the construction of this hillside. It's pretty amazing how they worked. And we see this somewhat irregular face to this construction block, but we know that they worked in a different way than we do, and they had to build continents, so they weren't pretty about their section faces, but we can see the straight line through many different, quote, eras of time. Makes no sense unless it's terraforming. So the evidence continues to accrue for the terraforming hypothesis, the continental terraforming hypothesis. We continue to see the straight lines through, quote, sedimentary material, right? There's a creek along the road, so we're essentially following a creek bank. This is the side of a small hill, so that's why we have this diagonal sectioning. So this is strong building for a hill that then slowly goes down to become a creek bank. So we can see how the ancients wanted their hills to last. They're building with triangles. They're building with diagonals to the face of the hill. So we're facing the hill now, and we see the triangle sections, the diagonal sectioning that they did. Now this line is a different diagonal than this line, but they're diagonals. So that's the strength of the building of the ancients. This one's a diagonal too, slight diagonal. And there you have a massive diagonal to the face of the hill. So, diagonals, that's what we find. Strong building. Any engineer will tell you, you build in triangles, then you're doing good work.